It's Monday, August 24th. We're in the Administration Building, 12121 West North Avenue. We'll begin, please, with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Dr. Ertl, please.
Mr. Bowden?
Here.
Mrs. Casey?
Here.
Mrs. Fee?
Excused.
Mr. Croner?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Excused.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Here.
Mrs. Randall?
Here. Thank you. Begin with public comment on non-agenda items. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. The board, following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with a member or members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items this evening. Is there any comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for a separate discussion and action? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, community comment? Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Thank you. I just have a comment, and periodically, I know I do make this comment because we receive many donations to help us do all the things that we want to do for children in the district. And 2 very large donations we're approving this evening, which is one of our elementary school playground equipment, and also some money for one of our scoreboards at the high school. So, really it's outstanding the amount of support that we have for the schools, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Ertl, was the Jefferson, was that from the PTA, all of the 12,000?
Yes, it was.
It was, okay. And I know they worked a couple years to collect that, I think.
They did.
So, okay. Then we need a vote, please.
Mr. Bowden?
Yes.
Mrs. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we have a report tonight on human resources hiring practices. Did you need to start, or?
I think the report by Mr. Hubble and Mr. Nemore will kind of highlight some of the issues that we're dealing with hiring that have come about. I guess there's some pre and post Act 10, and they're going to talk about some of the changes and kind of the way we're operating now and what we're trying to accomplish, and a little bit of how well we're doing with it. So,
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before we get into the hiring practices, this is the first time I've had an opportunity to address the board since starting a few months ago, and just want to say how grateful I am to be here and want to thank you for the opportunity. So that being said, over the next 10 minutes or so, we're going to talk about hiring practices and hiring update in the district, sort of a 30,000 foot view, and really it's going to break down into 3 sections. We'll talk a little bit about the history of bargaining and specifically salary negotiations with teachers. Second, we'll talk about the new paradigm over the past 4 years or so. And then third and finally, we'll talk about where we are in Wauwatosa now and where we're going. So, next slide, please. A little bit about the history of the salary schedule. And before we get into the history and the new paradigm, 2 caveats of sorts. Sometimes when we talk about the old and the new paradigms, there's some emotions in some cases associated with that. I want to emphasize that I'm not making any judgments about which one is better or worse. I'm just describing kind of the lay of the land. So my goal is to describe and not to make any judgments. And second, since this is only a 10-minute overview and it's a 30,000-foot view, I'm going to make some generalizations, and as with any generalization, there are exceptions. So I point that out as well. So that being said, the sort of pre-2011 throughout the state of Wisconsin, pretty much every public school district, maybe there were a few exceptions, but basically every public school district had a salary schedule. And when a new teacher was hired, it was pretty simple to, in a sense, quote unquote, negotiate. Because all you had to do was look at the salary schedule, how many years of experience, let's say 4 years of experience for a particular teacher, how much education, let's say somebody had a master's. So you just look at the chart and there's a particular cell, 4 years of experience and a master's, and that is what the teacher was offered. And there was really no room for individual negotiation because that salary schedule was bargained with the union, and the collective bargaining agreement governed the salary schedule. So because of that, there was relative uniformity internally and externally. All teachers in the district that had, for example, 4 years of experience and a master's would make the same amount of money, same salary, and even across districts, when negotiations were occurring, the parties would bring salary schedules from comparable districts to the table, and throughout that process, I mean, there was some variation between districts and among districts, but for the most part, the beginning salary of comparable districts was pretty much in the same ballpark. The upper end of the salary schedule was pretty much in the same ballpark, and everything in between. So that's the kind of the old paradigm. The new paradigm, we still consider years of experience and education as two factors, but other factors enter in. For example, market considerations. For better or for worse, some teachers and positions have more bargaining power than others because they're harder to fill positions, and because of the law of supply and demand, they might be able to get somewhat of a higher salary. So market considerations come into play, but also internal comparisons come into play, because if a particular teacher coming into the district is interested in making, pick your number, $50,000, but we have a comparable teacher in the district in the same position making 47, we have to take that in consideration as well. So, and again, there's no salary schedule, so there are negotiations involved. And so under the new paradigm, the salary is individually bargained with the teacher. So under the old paradigm, we would say you have 4 years of experience and a master's, this is your salary. Under the new paradigm, we might say, given the totality of the circumstances, the district is willing to offer X. And then the teacher might say, great, or the teacher might say, well, how about X plus Y? And then there's a negotiation process that goes on. Also, not so much in Wauwatosa, but some districts are offering other incentives. The one that comes to mind is that some districts, in an effort to woo another teacher or a teacher from a different district, might say, in addition to the salary, for example, we'll pay the liquidated damages in your contract as a way to get the individual to come to his or her district. And this results in less uniformity, whereas in the past, 4 years of experience, master's, everybody would make the same. Under the new paradigm, 4 years in a master's, there's probably sort of a range. Some people might be making this, some people might be making a little more, so there's a range, but it's not an exact amount. Some people refer to this as the world of free agency, and there actually was an article in the Journal Sentinel last week on this topic about how some districts are having difficulties filling positions, and I'll just quote here, now there's much more turnover on the teacher level. With teachers as free agents, the impact on kids can be felt more acutely. So teachers are free agents. They can feel more free to, in a sense, ply their wares on the open market. So we combine this free agency with a phenomenon where we have fewer applicants. This is from the same article in the Journal Sentinel, pointing out that there's a scarcity of applicants in math, science, special ed, and bilingual education. And I might add a few more to that, but this is what the Journal Sentinel mentioned. So we have free agency, fewer applicants, arguably more movement, and so in some cases that puts kind of the squeeze on the school district. So that's where we are with salary negotiations in general, old paradigm, new paradigm, and now where are we in Wauwatosa? This year, and this changes hourly over the past couple of weeks. Today alone, we filled 4 positions. The snapshot you have here is from last week, Thursday. As of last week, Thursday, we had filled 47 full-time positions, teaching positions, 14 part-time positions that equated to 7 full-time equivalencies, and we had 6 FTEs vacant. I believe that number 6 has gone down to, is it 2, D? 2. So we've filled all but 2 FTEs. So that's good news. So I think we're actually in pretty good shape with the exception of perhaps 1 or 2 positions. And kudos to the principals in particular and all the supervisors for all their work in filling these positions, because each position, obviously there's an interview process, reference checking. It's a lot of work, and the principals have really stepped up. And finally, in terms of the process update, when I came to the district, we have a lot of good processes in place. In particular, we have an online posting system where supervisors submit their postings that they would like put up on the website in an online format. Same thing with an online candidate referral. We have made a few tweaks to the hiring process. One in particular, you have a sheet in front of you, information for the interview team. In some cases, it wasn't always clear that the members of the interview team really understood what the role of the interview team was, and perhaps some of the considerations about confidentiality, et cetera. So to create more uniformity across the district, the document you have in front of you is now going to be distributed to all committees that hire teachers and probably administrators as well. Second, background checks. We have done and we continue to do background checks on all employment applicants. For better or for worse, the district historically has only done background checks in state. I'm in negotiations with 1 or 2 background check agencies. We'd like to expand that to national background checks, especially given the way that individuals move around. Diversity recruitment. I've been working with Ms. Bowers and Mr. Garrison on diversity recruitment. Our goal in general is to increase the number of minority applicants with the goal, hopefully, of increasing the diversity of our workforce. And finally, liquidated damages. One phenomenon that perhaps makes it easier for teachers to leave Wauwatosa is that we have no liquidated damages in our individual contracts. So a teacher literally can leave on August 28th, September 15th, or November 3rd, or any date thereafter, and have no financial penalty. That is probably not recommended, at least by me. So I'm going to recommend going into next year that we add liquidated damages to the teacher contracts in the same way that they're in the administrative contracts, and probably a graduated scale. So if they break their contract in June, it's X. If they break it in July, it's X plus Y. And if they break it after the school year starts, it'd probably even be a little higher. So I think we're in good shape, and any questions you might have, Dean and I are here to respond.
Thank you very much.
If I can just add one more thing, I
Yep.
think another component that it's important to think about is the free agent movement and the movement of teachers. The issue with seniority, with that being gone, that used to be something that kept people in the district once they became higher on the list, 3, 4, 5 years. It was much more difficult to leave and take the risk of going to a new district where you step in you're in year 1, year 2, where you may be the first one, if there were layoffs, would be the first one to go. So I think that being gone has created an issue. Also, the elimination in a lot of districts of post-retirement benefits, which is another thing that kept people in the same district, was if you work so many years, you get X for post-retirement, and many districts have eliminated that completely, although we have not.
Thank you. Board members. Sharon.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That is, it's very good, and you've been busy as as a hiring team. Thank you for that. And we, I think, remarkably have very few still open positions. So that's good news. How are we in comparables to other districts when, we're talking about adding back things like liquidated damages. Is that a standard that other districts are doing? Because I wouldn't want us to fall out of competitiveness if it's already competitive.
I haven't done an empirical analysis, but if I had to guess, I would guess that a minority of districts does not have liquidated damages. And beyond that, at some level, to me, it seems like the right thing to do for a variety of reasons. I mean, it's a contract. If the contract is broken, there are damages that the district suffers. I mean, the students in particular, if a teacher leaves in the middle of the school year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think creating a disincentive for a teacher to do that at the end of the day helps our students. But I don't know I haven't done an empirical analysis of which districts do or do not. But I would say it's, in my view, it's recommended.
Okay. And just one more
Yeah,
follow-up
go
question,
ahead.
if I may.
Yeah, please.
To some of the soft things, you know, that sometimes we don't talk about, the work environment, how are we, I'm sure the group has discussed that, and how are we doing with that?
And by the soft things, I'm trying to envision what we mean by that in terms of.
Well, I'm talking about things like, you know, obviously I believe we have a fantastic work environment, and the culture in all of our buildings are, you know, they're supportive and growth. So those are the things, you know, and people know each other. It's a family, not only Wauwatosa family, but also the school culture family. So, you know, all the things that make it, you know, a fun and good place to work to retain people.
Absolutely.
So there's that, you know, monetary benefit side of things, and then there's the work environment, culture, supportiveness, you know, people having accountability and being allowed to take risks, all those kinds of things. So,
You know, I think there's a couple ways to anecdotally gauge that. One would be conversations you have with new employees after they've been here for a period of time and they've worked in other districts, and they make those comparisons. I think another one probably more telling is when people do leave our district, and we have conversations with them after they've left and start working in other places. You know, I'm sure the ones that have found the grass to be greener aren't always going to come back and say, Wauwatosa stunk and I told you so and whatever. But we have, actually, I've never had one of those conversations. So but I've had plenty of the other ones that people do come back and say, or you have conversations like, boy, this is really great working here. And I mean, as recent as a couple weeks ago, I had one of those conversations in just a short period of time in our school district, and noticing differences in the work environment, and those I think are the important things too.
And can I just add to that I also know of 3 employees that did not leave our district that got recruited by other districts, and actually were in 2 of those cases offered pretty large salary increases. So some of our teachers have been tempted and have stayed for exactly that reason, because of their colleagues, the culture they work in at their buildings. It was a really hard decision, but they stayed in Wauwatosa.
Thank you for adding that.
And I'll add to that. I just want to add one thing to that. Working in 3 of our buildings before coming to central office here, I will say that, and in administration in all 3 buildings, is that is one thing, at least the buildings I've been in, that we, you know, focused on with the staff. We, you know, talked about. I mean, obviously, you're here to educate our children, and that's what your number one focus is. But it's also you're part of this, you know, team. We're here as the 3 buildings I've been in. We are a team. We're here together. We're here to support each other, to really be a family, and that's really what it's about. And I truly believe that that's really our whole district. And again, the 17 plus years I've been here, that's really, I think, the feel that most people have when they're here. And that's what we want to, you know, keep growing. And I think that we do have it.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
I just have a couple.
Mrs. Casey.
Thanks again for this report. It's was interested to be reminded of the differences and kind of where we are today. Can you speak a little bit about like the number, just roughly, no, nothing concrete, like a number of applications that you're seeing at each, elementary, middle, and high school, and kind of if you have any, generalizations about that, if you will, and then kind of like what does an interview look like in the district? And I know that there's always like are always teams of grade level teams included in those interviews, and to what extent are you involving parents and students?
Absolutely. So with the number of applications, typically I don't necessarily look at each weekend application. Typically the principals do that. So I'll lean on Dean here a little bit. We can brainstorm together. I think it really depends on the position. I mean, some positions we literally get 0 applicants. Those are the harder to fill positions. I would say with some of the elementary, 75 to 100, would you say?
Right, yeah, I think some of the elementary openings, I think, and I didn't look, but we just had recently 2 elementary postings within the last week or so. And there still were, I believe, 50 to 75 applicants in those pools. So those postings still get quite a few candidates. But some of our secondary postings don't get those type of candidates. Like science right now, you're lucky if you get 1 or 2. I mean, you'd be very lucky if you would get that. So that's difficult. Those are difficult. Spanish is extremely difficult to fill right now. So it all depends on the position you're looking for and the number of candidates you get. And obviously the bigger pool you have, the better quality candidates you're going to most likely get out of those pools.
I can give you some examples. 166 for an elementary teacher at Roosevelt, 29 for a middle school math teacher, 25 for academic lab teacher, 2 for a high school Spanish part-time, 1 for speech language pathologist full-time, long-term sub, speech language path, 4 applicants, science teacher secondary full-time, 3 applicants, chemistry biology 6 applicants, 40 for Eisenhower Elementary grade 2, that's a fairly recent posting. So 105 for associate principal at East, 100 for athletic director. So those are just some examples.
Thank you.
And then in terms of the interview process itself, one of our short to long-term goals is to create more uniformity as to how these interviews look. So I can't guarantee that every interview looks like this, but in general, what we'd like to see is whoever is chairing the interview committee, probably the hiring administrator, distributes this form to all of the members of the interview team, which oftentimes includes parents, other teachers, administrators, and always there's somebody from student learning on the committee. So they obviously have a lot to offer as well. But then at some point, the hiring administrator, prior to the candidates entering, talks through with the hiring committee what kind of some of the norms are, emphasizing, for example, that everything that's done in there is confidential. Things aren't to be shared out. Whoever is selected by the hiring administrator should be supported by the entire group. Emphasizing the role of the committee. The role of the committee is to provide input to the hiring administrator. The role of the committee is not to rank the candidates or even to select the candidate, just to give differing perspectives. Emphasizing the non-discriminatory nature of the process. And then also just some procedural things. If the candidate asks about pay or benefits, how do you respond to those things? And then typically the way it works is the hiring administrator has come up with a list of questions, and then go around the table, each person asks one question, and then do that with all the candidates. All the candidates get the same questions. When the candidates are done, the hiring committee provides its input to the administrator. So that's the general process, and I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to it.
Well, the background or reference checks is a very
absolutely.
big component as well after that.
So does it start right at the building? I mean, the principal gets the names from weekend? or
Absolutely.
when does it get to you?
It gets to
or
me
to the district
at the
office?
very end of the process. So they select the hiring team, have the interviews, do the reference checks, and then when they have a candidate to recommend, there's an online form that they fill out, and then it comes to our office. And then at that point, I contact the candidate and talk about salary and contract and next steps.
Okay, thanks.
If I may just.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
Two follow-up questions. I'm thinking back to, I'm not going to date myself, but my last interview in a neighboring community, which I was eventually hired in, I felt it was a very rigorous process. Even back then, I was first interviewed by the assistant superintendent and the building principal. And then I sat down to a group of 12 teachers throughout the school and parents. And then I had a team interview with the team that I would be working with. And so I guess my thoughts then are kind of evolving to, if we're in this free agency kind of mentality and people are negotiating, is there value to the district and our students if we, present or, require more rigorous interviewing and more rigorous performance? I know sometimes I've been involved with some of the interviews at WSTEM, and we have not been, but the principal has, asked the teachers to come and teach and teach in front of some kids, and we get some feedback from the kids. But I'm almost thinking, is there value in that, in having a more rigorous, does that make it look or seem, or can it be more competitive? And then my other question would be, is there plans to actively recruit?
Mm-hmm. So with the teaching component, Dean, would you like to address that?
Yeah, actually, one thing that we did miss is part of the
Yep.
process is that they do need to teach a lesson. So there is that component also. So we did start doing that. I believe it was last year, actually, a year ago. So the candidates do when we narrow the field down, that the finalists do need to come in and teach a lesson. So that is one of the steps. So you bring in a few people to teach a lesson, and then depending on that lesson, you move forward. So that is a step in the process. And again, it depends on the hiring principal, because you can, like you said, you could take feedback from. You could talk to some students in the class. You can talk to, obviously, the people that are observing the candidate teach. You're going to definitely talk about the lesson that was taught, and go forward from there. So that is definitely one piece.
And in terms of recruitment, we specifically talked about diversity recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Garrison primarily, and I've been involved in some conversations as well with Ms. Bowers. We have kind of a three-prong approach that we're hoping to increase our minority candidate pool. Number one, we're going to reach out to some local organizations like the Centro Hispano, the Urban League, organizations that serve minority populations, and see if they have a job development. And for those that have a job development wing, whenever we post a position, we send out an email anyway to all staff. So we're thinking that perhaps we could just, if they're interested, we could just send all job postings to whoever their job development coordinator is, and then hopefully they can distribute it more widely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one component. Also, Mr. Garrison has reached out to the schools of education and, 5 or 7 local universities, hoping to increase the number of minority candidates. And also, we've talked about increasing our presence at some minority recruitment fairs, and actually not only talking with people, but getting their names, emails, seeing if they want to be informed of all of our postings as well. And we can just include them on all the postings also.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Bowden, please.
Thanks again for your report. Can you give me an idea, this year, 47 hires, maybe over 50, what does that look like compared to post or before, pre-Act 10?
I don't have any empirical data. I did talk with an administrator whose opinion I respect, who's been in the district for longer than I have. And what he told me is, in his view, it has gone up. And I don't think he's done any empirical studies either, but he thought maybe 20%. But that was just one person's opinion but it's the best I have. So I don't know if any of the administrators who've been around pre-Act 10 in Wauwatosa have any
Well,
insight?
500, how many teachers do we have? 580?
Five.
580, 47 openings, what is that? It's less than 10%.
Yeah.
And we were, for the past 2 years, this is lower than we've been for the past 3 to 4 years. So this year is, it seems to me like it's a lot more, but when you look at the numbers, it's not. It's lower than what we've had in the past. Even the year before Act 10, our numbers were higher. Then the year after was lower, and it maintained a little bit, and this is actually lower than we've been in 5 years.
Another question, I think you mentioned it. Did you say during the interview process, the candidates are not ranked? In other words, you could have a team of 12, and, because I've been on some of these in TOSA, and the administrator, whoever, would ask us to rank. So that's not going on anymore, or?
We're trying to get more uniformity. That would be a process that I would recommend against. Really, the purpose of the team, as I think we see it at district office at least, is to get input from a variety of stakeholders, as opposed to ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, because ultimately it's going to be the hiring administrator's decision as to whom to hire. So more specifically with the input, it could be questions like, are there any candidates we just can't, would not be a good fit for us? Are there any, what are some positive characteristics and maybe areas for growth for the other candidates? And then what are the other questions that we'd like the hiring administrator to look into in the reference checks? So that's the direction we'd like people to go. I can't guarantee that everybody's handing out this form at this point, or that they're not asking to rank the candidates, but that's the direction we'd like to go.
That's the direction we will go. We'll be using this form. Everybody will be following
Went
the same
from like
procedure.
to will.
That's right. Exactly.
I mean, Craig came in the middle of kind of the hiring
Right.
season, and his opportunity to get his feet on the ground and start implementing consistent procedures. This will take place next year.
One final question. I know we we only have 2 vacancies. My question is sort of piggyback to what Christy was saying. Is there times where we select a candidate just to fill the position, and the hiring person knows that the people in it's like, hey, we need a body, a science, whatever, any of these, but we know this candidate is not the right candidate? Is that, do you know what I'm saying? I'm not talking
Absolutely.
about 50 applicants for a second grade at Eisenhower or 150. I'm talking about, we get down to beginning of school, we've got 2 vacancies, we've got 2 applicants, do you know what I'm asking?
Absolutely. It's hard to answer in a theoretical. I can say that there are dilemmas. So if the choice comes down to you have 1 applicant who is certified and we need somebody in front of the students, would we like to have somebody who's maybe better qualified? So what the choice is, have nobody or have a certified person in front of the students. Choices like that do need to be made.
We've also done long-term subs
Right.
when there's nobody that is acceptable for
Yeah.
a position. So we'll do.
And
we'll
we've
use
also
long-term subs.
have, instead of doing that, we have oftentimes gone to emergency licensing,
Absolutely.
where we might have like someone that we know has excellent qualities of being a teacher. They might not have the licensure in that particular area, but we want to put a quality person in front of students, and then they have to be enrolled in a program that would lead toward licensure what they're teaching. So we've done that probably in lieu of just hiring just anyone. We typically still go for a quality candidate that may not just be the best alignment with licensure. That's what I would.
I would also say, I mean, this, I guess, almost personal in saying there's nobody that has been hired in the past 10 years, 11 years that I wouldn't put in front of my own kids. So I feel pretty confident about that. So we're not hiring people that are going to
Absolutely.
do bad things or just really really cause problems for kids. I can think of a lot of different really difficult positions we've had to fill and last minute, and every single time it's been with someone that I think has turned out and done a good job. If not, we learn that quickly.
If I may, one more.
Yes,
follow
go
up.
ahead.
You mentioned in the hiring process, one of the bullet points, when a candidate, let's say we have this candidate that's moving from another district, and we really want this candidate, and he gives you a price, and we don't want to lose this candidate, but his price is more than Mr. or Mrs. X that works at East, or whatever it may be, but we know this is a top-notch. Is that a deal breaker? Do you know what I'm asking? So the person has chosen to leave another district or whatever, and through the interview process, this person is recognized to be an outstanding candidate, but has a dollar sign, whatever, in their mind. You, or the administrator, knows what the other candidates or teachers are making within the district. Is that a deal breaker? Do you know what I'm saying?
I would say never. I mean, there are a lot of factors that go in. So, I mean, I believe that the Wauwatosa School District generously compensates its employees. At some level, you know, there may be some candidates who their number is just too high. And then, you know, in particular, if there's a quality applicant pool, you know, we can, in many cases, you know, find somebody who is equally as good or darn near close, and compensate that person more in line with what the district can afford. So, are there candidates who have, you know, said, I want X and X is too much? Yes, that happens. But as Dr. Ertl said, you know, we get quality candidates before our students at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Croner?
Thank you. I just have one question. It's the one step after someone's hired. So if it's outside the scope of tonight, just say so.
No,
We can
that's
talk about it another time. When we hire first-year teachers, and I know that many teachers leave the profession within the first 3 years, 'cause actually I did some student teaching once, so I know how stressful it is. What kind of programs, or do we have programs to mentor first-year teachers in the different levels? And what would those be like?
Absolutely. We do have a mentor program, and Dean has been a principal and worked with the mentor program, so I'll defer to him.
Right, when we hire a new teacher, they do go into if they're a brand new teacher like you're talking about, it's a 2-year mentor program. So they do the principal assigns them a mentor, and in most cases, it's somebody from their own building. It depends on, I guess, what they're teaching. You'd like to assign them a mentor that's, in their same subject area. It's convenient. Somebody that there's only a few of them in the district, and might not be someone in the building, but a lot of times it's in their building, so it's really convenient. They do meet with and we can actually get for you, there's a mentor handbook that we put together. Actually, we modified it this year a little bit, that they get along with the mentors. They meet and talk about all different things. And part of the mentor process, there's a few things that are part of it, is they do observe each other teach. They talk about all sorts of things, curriculum-wise, what they do in their profession. It's school-wise, because when you're coming out of college, you have a lot of things going through your head, and it's not all just teaching in front of the kids, which is important, but it's like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I find that? Where do I get this answer? They're there for those reasons also. We also hold, I forgot now, was it 3 or 4 sessions during the year? 4. I forgot. It's 4 sessions during the year where they come after school to on some topics. There are topics created. Pat Gilbert and Leah Nazy do sessions for them on their mentor and the mentee. Come to those sessions, they're like an hour sessions on different, and they haven't defined, and I don't know if Beth knows any further, they defined what they are this year yet, what these sessions will be this year. But I know last year, for example, with new teachers, I know one session was they're on the PI 34 license, and they had to get some information on how to get started with getting their license going in, and what they have to do with their goals and things like that for their license. And also then they talk about overall, curriculum and what they're doing in class, and how the, instruction, and all those things. So they are supported for the first 2 years with a mentor in our district, and that's part of it. And the mentors in our district do get compensated. to do that. I mean, that's because they are spending some time, and the ones that are really good spend a lot of time with their mentees, because they take pride in that, and they want their mentees to succeed. So there's a lot done with them if obviously the mentor is doing a good job. And I don't know, Beth, if you have anything else to add with that also, because I know.
I would just say that that was kicked off last week. All last week, we had new teachers in, and we had sessions for our elementary teachers. We spend a lot of time on our literacy program and introducing them to the core program and what our expectations are. We also introduce them to our math program as well, and help them prepare like the first week's lessons and get them into the curriculum. And then we have other sessions like on technology, things like that. During the school year, we try not to make this a fragmented effort. So during the school year, the same people that we had doing the training this first week, they continue in those support seminars. So they continue on with literacy. They continue on. They might do some preparation for parent conferences and how to communicate. At the secondary level, the emphasis is on more universal instructional practices. One of those is literacy in the content initiative, so that when new people to our district come, we want to sustain the work that we've been doing. So we do literacy in the content, differentiation, things that just inform good instructional practice and engagement. And then our secondary district teacher leaders that facilitate some of those workshops also coach then in the buildings, and they coach new teachers, and they also coach some of the other teachers as well. So we try to have continuity in the kinds of things that we're introducing them to and make them like higher leverage practices. So that's.
That was a lot of detail, thank you. My only follow-up would be, do we have any idea at all whether we're how successful that all those programs are compared to, the average loss of teachers in the first few years of their career?
I don't think we have any, I don't
Well, we
know that we
survey.
have data, but I think,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that we lose a lot of first through third year teachers. I think most people generally stay with us. That's just clearly a anecdotal statement.
I was just going to say, we do survey all new teachers at the end of the year on the things that we provide support for them, to see like what support's effective, what's not, what they found was helpful, and we use that data each year to inform what we're going to do the next year. I would say, as far as attrition numbers, I think that we do pretty well in keeping teachers that are here.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, couple of things. Thank you very much. I like how you presented the overview and then took a lot of our questions. I appreciate that. Since you referred to our diversity hiring person, do you mind if I ask him if he
Please do.
would like to add anything at all? It's up to you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Board of Wauwatosa. Sorry, no. Good evening. I was going to talk things.
Tim.
I think one of the interesting things about the district is that we are willing to address the issue of more minority groups. Our superintendent has graciously allowed us to take a look at that information and come back to the table with some ideas and how we can better recruit minorities to our wonderful district. One of the things I will say is that in just being a minority recruit to the district, it's a personal touch that is needed. We have to really go out and sit with candidates that in most cases wouldn't think Wauwatosa. We have to really go out and sit down with them and say, hey, this is a school district that is neighboring to a district that you probably will want to, with that thinking of going to, that we're actually looking for you as well. As our minorities increase over the years, minorities within our district increase over the years, it'll become more and more important that we attract more candidates of minorities. So I will say, like I said, the superintendent has graciously allowed us to look at that data and come back to the table and say, let's try something different and see how it goes. It's not something that I'm real, it's not something that I'm real I gotta be careful how I say this because I don't want it to come off the wrong way. We want the best candidates. That's what we want here in this district. Me and Mr. Hubble did have a clear conversation about that just the other day. We want the best candidates in front of our students. The minority recruitment falls under that conversation. How those candidates rise to the top, again, I believe it's practices that we have within the district that we will have to take a look at, as Mr. Hubble has clearly stated. Again, we do want the best candidates in front of our students, whether they're minorities or not. So it's kind of the best way I want to answer that piece as it pertains to minority recruitment.
You know, thank you. I mean, that's really very candid. You may not feel like you're being candid, but and I think you're right, because I think we've known that there are minority people out there, but they don't think to come to Tosa. And I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. So I understand what you're saying. You're not going to recruit minorities because they're minorities. You're going to recruit them. You're going to let them know that we would like them to consider Wauwatosa. And that all makes sense, I think, to any of us who have been here for a while. So thank you for your work on that. Appreciate it. Mrs. Casey, for Mr. Garrison.
No, yeah, just, I don't know, I think you might find this interesting. Oh God, I think it was 2 years ago. Carpool, Longfellow, 5 boys, and this actually came up in a conversation one day, and they were talking, and I was just, listening, and, I wasn't really partaking in it, and I think even afterwards, Dr. Erdahl, I shared the conversation with you, but the kids do notice, and apparently if an adult is biracial, that does not count per this conversation. So I just thought that was interesting and wanted to share that with you.
The students, they're blatantly honest. They have no problems with telling the flat out truth about how they feel about going through a school district without having any representation.
Yeah.
One of my first experiences over at East High School, when I first walked up to some of the students there, I was like, Mr. Garrison, you're the first African American male that I've had that experience in working with personally. It's kind of shocking, but in the same token, they're honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Over the years that they've been here, they haven't had a male, African American male, per se, have that one-on-one relationship with them, and or feel as if they are a teacher to them. I know we've had some administrators, of course, but students have a different perspective in what they're looking for within each minority.
Yes.
So if they feel like they can actually learn something from you, you become their teacher. If they feel like you just want to know that's going to talk to you, then you become their administrator. So that's two different things there. So it was interesting for our students, at least from my perspective, for them to say, you're the first teacher that I've had. Although I was clearly an administrator, they said I was the first teacher that they had. So I actually asked that clarifying question there to them, and they was very clear about it. Yeah, we've had administrators, but you first got, we feel like, we actually learned something from, which is eye-opening to me when they, of course, made those statements. So yes, that is true. Our students do have a great understanding of what looks like them over the course of some years, of course, and it's just important that, I believe it's important to the district that we continue to attract the best candidates that often represents our district as well. And it's not about African Americans, it's other. We need some Hispanics, we need more Hmongs, Asians. I mean, it's not just about one set of minorities as well. We have to attract other, so that's the other side of that.
We're excited for your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, again, thank you. I feel like we've all been kind of thrown into this. And we're trying to stay caught up with Act 10 even now. So I feel much more comfortable after this great discussion that we're working on figuring it out. I'm hoping as we do our planning, our strategic planning, that we can possibly have some emphasis on this as well. And I know that we're going to have to be working with other districts as well, but I feel really much better after hearing everybody, and thank you, Mrs. Ehrenberger, for joining in and contributing. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Is there any community comment? Did you want to talk about your dad or what he said? No. All right. Seeing none, we'll have the superintendent's report on the administrative retreat, please.
One of the most asked questions of school administrators, like around May and June, is, do you guys work in the summer? And I always struggle with that question with a yes, and well, what do you do? There's a lot of things we do. But for 3 days at least, all the administrators in the Wauwatosa School District each year, we have a retreat. We call it a retreat. And I know that sometimes the principals walk away from it not feeling refreshed and retreated, but they feel overwhelmed with a lot of new things and just kind of pressures of day to day. But what the connection I want you to, as a board, to see is a number of things that we worked on came directly from the board table. For example, the policy that was just approved, culturally proficient schools, we went through a process to review that to make sure everybody, all the administrators knew this was approved, and continuing to work on administrative guidelines. So we spent time on that. We spent time on the bullying policy. Mr. Garrison led us through a little quizzing exercise, and some of us were more successful than others with answering the questions that he had, but we try to have a little bit of fun with our learning as well. But reviewing that, making sure that we have procedures in place. A big part of the 3 days was spent, at least my perception of big, an important piece was our professional learning communities and making sure that we reground ourselves in the core principles of professional learning communities and have a focus on it this year. We've been doing it now for 6 years, and as things ebb and flow like any kind of initiative, it starts meaning one thing to different people as we go along. So the goal this year is to bring it back in and make sure we're grounded. So we started with that piece of it this summer, and we'll continue with our administrative meetings. And the first 2 Wednesdays in each building are going to be principals working with teachers to kind of do the same thing with all of the teachers. And then after that, we made a few changes that teachers will be in one professional learning community for the entire year and not switched up into different groups, and get back to my mantra of saying no to anything else that anybody wants to do on Wednesdays. So people don't ask. The answer is always no. It's time for teachers to collaborate because we know that's an important way for improvement in schools. So a lot of time there. The HR department, which you just heard from, talked about the hiring practices that were shared here and had some discussions with the principals' investigations when things don't always go right, of how to investigate, what we're going to do when we investigate. Dean led the discussion on the effectiveness project, our evaluation system, and I noticed I got a lot of emails over the weekend that components were added to my evaluation system. So I know the work continues over the weekend on the effectiveness project, but I think we've seen some good success from that in the first year. I know there were a lot of concerns about workload and what it'll mean, but I think it's led to some good improvement, good discussions. We're also starting a book study which relates to how to communicate with teachers on effectiveness and about teaching and learning. So that's a part that I think everybody picked up their books, so that'll be ongoing through our administrative meetings throughout the year. Special ed referral and evaluations. Beth did a data dive. It's kind of like off the high dive, but it was about data. We know data. We use a lot of data in the district, and so there were some discussions on that. And school improvement plans, those are building goals, which ultimately come out of our long-range plan and our district development plan. But as we know, that's going to be undertaken this fall as the board is working with the administration, with a consultant for strategic planning, and we'll get the community involved, set those goals, and make sure the building goals are all aligned with it. So principal coaching, we had a discussion about that's taking place and what that's going to look like this year, which is going to be a little bit different than last year, a little bit more targeted, and we're working on that component as well. So that's kind of what we did, and I think you can kind of see some of those same components are discussed here at the board table, are discussed in the buildings, discussed administratively. I think it's important that the board sees that there is that tie-in throughout the organization. It's not everything is random. The board isn't doing random things that don't impact what goes on with the administrative team and in the schools. So.
Thank you. Board members? So that's the long answer to, do you work in the summer?
Yes.
Yes,
Just for
very
3
hard.
days.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other community comment on the report?
We did observe a good video too, if anybody has seen the Key and Peele video on, it's kind of a ESPN take on the teachers, teacher draft and free agency, and
Will you send us a link?
I can do that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Rather enjoyable.
Thank you for the report.
I've seen it.
Okay, are there any comments on anything that was not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn the regular school board meeting and reconvene into an executive session to discuss the superintendent's evaluation in conference room A. Statutory exemption to Wisconsin's open meetings law is contained in section 1985-1C.
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second?
Thank you very much. And Dr. Ertl, please.
Mr. Bowden,
Yes.
Mrs. Casey,
Yes.
Mr. Croner,
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld,
Yes.
Mrs. Randall.
Yes, thank you. We're adjourned and 5 minutes in conference.